The Harry Potter franchise has been one of the biggest franchises in the world. Doesn't matter who you are or where you come from, you have seen and loved many of these films and books over the years. They kind of lost that reputation because of the Fantastic Beasts films and behind-the-scenes issues. But now with the Harry Potter reboot coming, I'm very conflicted on this series and the future of it. Because as a massive fan of the series, every time I hear news about this upcoming reboot, I can't help but feel excited but also worried. I grew up with the films, I have read most of the books, but this series just has some things that just make it feel weird, and I'm very nervous right now. Now, reboots have been something that have claimed Hollywood for years. Reboots and remakes, they basically control the industry for better or for worse. Over the past few years, we have seen many reboots and doing something very different than what came before. Some have been great, but also some of them have been completely pointless. Now, are reboots inherently a bad thing? Absolutely not. It just depends on what it is. If a film could do something new and interesting with these stories, I think a reboot can be useful. But more often than not, a reboot can also just lose what makes these worlds special and lose a lot of people in the process. But also, some films just don't need to be remade. There are just some films that are so perfect and you can never top it. Sometimes it's just better to leave the films the way they are. Like, imagine if someone tried to reboot Back to the Future, it just wouldn't be able to work. It would literally cause so much division, it would be insane. But there are some films out there that can benefit from reboots. Characters that have been around for decades, that have many stories to tell, that can do well. With franchise as a whole, there are some great ones, like James Bond restarting with Casino Royale, which was a great film and started off a great era of spy films and felt like something completely different. Even something like 2009 Star Trek, which, even though that film, while not perfect by any means, still had a reason to be told. It didn't just feel like they're just to make a quick buck, it earned its existence. But there are also so many examples of just cheap cash grabs that are just there to print money because of nostalgia. Take a look at the comics, specifically DC, who have done so many reboots. And in their case, it can go well, but it can also alienate a lot of their fans in the process. The DCU is looking to be great, but the only reason that is even happening is because it basically needed it after so many bad decisions. Heck, even look at Marvel. Ever since Secret Wars was announced, people have assumed that they could be doing a reboot, and that is definitely possible. So reboots don't only have the potential to get people interested, but they also have the potential to alienate people that fell in love with the world in the first place. Now again, I'm not saying there is no place for reboots or remakes. Without that, we would have never gotten the modern Planet of the Apes movies, which are fantastic. But then look at Disney with their live action remakes, which are the biggest amount of greed I have ever seen. And now audiences are starting to not be as fond as them, yet they still make money. Like, how do those films still make money? I'll never get it. So I'm not saying reboots are a bad thing by any means, but it depends on what's being rebooted. And in the case of Harry Potter, right now, it is just not needed. Now, for context, the Harry Potter franchise is my favorite film series ever. When the Harry Potter films started, it created a new world that hasn't been done before. The first film can be a little childish and the troll CGI is awful, but overall it was a good film, and Chambers of Secrets followed suit. But after Prisoner of Azkaban came, that film became a franchise that any demographic could get into. It is easily my favorite in the series. It is shot masterfully. Alfonso Cuarón did a great job handling the story and has the most character development out of all of the films. Then there was The Goblet of Fire, which in my opinion is the weakest film. Having read the books, I have a lot of issues. Yes, I am one of those people. But even then, it continued what made the series great, and even with its inaccuracies, I can still enjoy it for what it is. After that, Order of the Phoenix came out, which is my second favorite, mainly because of the battle Harry goes through. It's so interesting to see Harry question himself if he's like Voldemort, and while they do have similarities, what always separates them was love. Harry has had friends, he's had people he's willing to die for. Or whether it's Hermione, Ron's family, even someone like Dumbledore. He has that, while Voldemort has never had that. But then we have Half-Blood Prince, which is the second weakest. I still don't understand why they made it a romantic comedy. That always felt a little bit odd when the book was very dark, but nonetheless, it is still a solid film. But then the conclusion with Deathly Hallows Part 1 and 2 ended the series very well. I think the films are great and it ended in a very satisfying way. from the time being. But then the series came back with Fantastic Beasts, and this is where the franchise started to have problems. Now, I haven't seen Secrets of Dumbledore, I probably never will, but the first one is decent, I guess. Nothing I would call special or tainted the franchise. But then we had like the worst film in this series, Crimes of Grindelwald. I kid you not, I do not remember a single thing that happens. Nothing. It is just a dull, nothing burger sequel with nothing to tell. And once Secrets of Dumbledore came out, I didn't even have bothered to check it out, and they didn't even perform that well, which, considering where the Harry Potter franchise was, is actually kind of crazy. And that brings us to right now, where Warner Brothers are making a Harry Potter reboot, and God. Look, I want to say, I understand why they're making this. I mean, come on, it's pretty obvious. Also, from a storytelling standpoint, it is a brilliant idea. There is no denying that the films miss out on a lot, like the duel scene in the first film, the part where Nicholas Flamel in the second, and Dobby helping Harry in the tournament in Goblet of Fire instead of Neville. So this reboot isn't like the worst idea possible, but the problem isn't like from a storytelling standpoint. The problem is that it's way too early. If you ask me, this move screams of desperation. I've seen a lot of people say they should do Cursed Child or the Marauder series, and while those are better ideas, for one, Rowling has said she doesn't want to do those for some reason. Also, Cursed Child is something I just never want to see adapted. It's like, that book, or play, is wild. Like, Malfoy's son is rumored to be the son of Voldemort. It's such a weird play, and I do not understand why people want it to be adapted. Also, there are so many obstacles with this reboot that it has to go through, mainly when it comes to the casting. The films did such an amazing job with casting these characters, so now that they're recasting, it's basically a daunting task. It's kind of impossible to recast Harry, Ron, Dumbledore, Snape, and so many others. I don't think today you can get better than those castings. The original cast embodied those characters, and now they are starting from the ground up. It's like a hard obstacle to get through. There are some ideas around, like we have heard Mark Rylance could be Dumbledore, Brett Goldstein as Hagrid, or Papa as, I'm not even gonna try and pronounce that, as Snape, just to name a few. I really like the idea of Mark Rylance as Dumbledore. I think that's perfect casting. I know I'm gonna be giving a lot of crap to this reboot. If we are doing this, that is like pitch perfect casting, and I would love to see it. Brett Goldstein is one I'm not so sure about, but I'm willing to give it a chance, especially after how he was wasted in the MCU, having all of that be for nothing. For Snape, there's been a lot of controversy around that, but I don't necessarily hate the idea, but I wouldn't say I love it either. I do like how the age is accurate to the books, where he was young when Harry went to Hogwarts. Frankly, the age of Snape isn't like the biggest deal breaker for me, but if we are going to reboot, I think it's a good idea to go a little bit younger this time. That would be really refreshing for the character, especially how the late Alan Rickman played him basically perfectly. But then there is the trio, who seems like an impossible task. You cannot top up how well Daniel, Rupert, and Emma portray these characters, at least right now. Also, whoever gets cast is just gonna get a massive amount of hate just for being their replacement. They don't deserve that. Casting, frankly, will make or break this series because, well, if you don't, your show is dead before it even gets started. Now, I'm gonna throw a bone here. I've been very negative, and for good reason. But there are some good things for the series that has it going for it. For one, it's premiering on HBO. Like 90% of the time, they cook up a great series. So it's nice to see it will have that level of prestige. Normally, HBO does darker, more mature stories, but this is Harry Potter, so I highly doubt it'll be TVMA. That just doesn't really work for this brand. But there is a good chance this series is going to be taken more seriously from the start instead of how it was like when the film started. They're also the creatives. The team behind this are the showrunner Francesca Garnier and director Mark Myland. Both are known by Succession, which from what I've heard is fantastic. I plan to watch it, but I have a lot to do right now, so I can't. And if that level of quality is brought over, I think it could be something special. Sure, Francesca didn't write Succession, but just produced, but I still think you get my point. It could be good if handled right. But then there is what I am most interested in. How are they going to make Hogwarts look? When it was announced and they used the same logo and castle and music from the movies, I was left a little bit disappointed, just making it look like the movies did. but it was confirmed that Hogwarts Legacy would be connected to the show, so it looks like it might not be the case. Hogwarts Legacy is a fantastic game and does a great job at expanding the wizarding world. Right when it was announced, it got me thinking, what if we saw this castle but in live action? Honestly, if we are gonna reboot, I actually think that would be something really cool. Because if we just do a reboot and just do everything the same, that is just kind of boring. The whole point of a reboot is to show audiences and fans a new look at iconic characters. So give us a new Hogwarts, a new logo, a new music, a new aesthetic, new everything. Otherwise, what's the point? Oh, that's right, money. Now, I can't finish this video without talking about J.K. Rowling. Look, I could care less about people's views of politics or anything like that. However, in this case, I just cannot finish this video without talking about this, because she is one of the biggest reasons for this IP's downfall in recent years. She has said so many things that has pissed off a lot of people and has led to this brand becoming irrelevant. Because of her, there have been many boycotts around upcoming projects. This has happened towards Hogwarts Legacy, but it didn't really work. And that makes sense because boycotts rarely work. I know it's gonna happen for this series, and I wouldn't be surprised if it also doesn't work. Granted, this time JK is actually involved, so could be different, but if I had to guess, it probably won't. But like I said, I don't care about this stuff, so let's move on because I don't want to talk about this ever again. Now, with all that said, do I still like Harry Potter? And do I still like the movies, the books, all of that? Yes. I know people will come after me for saying this, but this has been something I've loved for years. People yelling at me will not change that. I just worry that this reboot may make the franchise look even worse than it is right now. They don't need to make things like The Cursed Child, or The Marauders, or The Founders of Hogwarts. But it's the fact that that is just being thrown away just to make money, and that's really disappointing. Take a look like what Warner Brothers is doing with Lord of the Rings. Now, this is also a bit desperate, but at least they're trying to tell new stories. Even if they have returning characters, they are still stories set in this world. Another example is what Disney is doing with Star Wars. For all the problems Disney has done with Star Wars, at least they have told new interesting stories from the beginning. But here, it's just the same thing over again. It's just too early. I don't think that's debatable. The films are still fresh in people's minds. You're just milking this series to make a quick buck at this rate. Now again, this is HBO. There is a good chance this could be good. Shows like House of the Dragon, The Last of Us, they got hate before they released, but they blew people away. And something like that could happen here, not saying it will, but it is possible. But even then, it just doesn't feel necessary right now. If this was something that happened in the next decade, it would have worked, but right now it just is not needed. But regardless of what happens, I'll try and remain cautiously optimistic and give it a chance. But as it stands right now, it's hard to be excited for the new series. So to bring it all home, the Harry Potter reboot has many issues against it right now. Whether it's the fact it's coming too early, a controversial writer attached, and just so many better ways to handle this franchise in general. Although there are some positives like HBO or the story, but the cons outweigh the pros. But what do you think of the Harry Potter reboot? Do you think it's a good idea, a bad idea, or are you somewhere in between? Thanks for clicking on this video. Make sure to hit that like button and subscribe for future videos. But until next time, take care.